All right, so in this section, we're going to be looking at how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. So before we look at that, let's look at the definition for what's a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation is an equation that can be written in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. Meaning we can plug some numbers in for a, b, and c. But what makes a quadratic equation is the degree, or we can say exponent, to this equation. The exponent here, the highest degree, it is 2. So what makes a quadratic equation a quadratic equation? The highest power in that equation is 2. And also, whenever we look at quadratic equations, there are several ways that we can solve a quadratic equation. One way is by factoring, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. Another way is by graphing, uh, completing the square, and also the quadratic formula. If we were to graph, and we talked about quadratic equations before, what makes a quadratic equation, um, being the power of 2. But when we graph the quadratic equation, the graph is going to be a U-shaped graph called a parabola. So remember, a linear equation, the highest power in that equation would be 1, but a quadratic equation, the highest power is a 2. Also, I want to make note that whenever you have an equation such as this quadratic equation equal to 0, this is written in standard form. This is going to be so key because our first lesson is solving a quadratic equation by factoring. And it's going to be key that you write your equation in standard form, meaning it must be equal to, the equation must be equal to 0. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. And before we get into solving the quadratic equation, a property that you will need to know and that we will be using is called the zero product property, where the zero product property says that if you have two factors, it's noted here, if a times b is equal to 0, then it's saying here that we can set each factor equal to 0. Our factor, we have a factor of A, we can set that equal to 0. We have a factor of B, we can set it equal to 0. And then it says we can do one or the other, or we can even do both. So our examples that we have here, I want to show you how to use the zero product property. So the zero product property we only can use whenever we have uh, an equation where it has been factored. We have factors. Remember, whenever we have times, it means we are multiplying. So here we have x plus 4 times 4x minus 0. Excuse me, 4x minus 3 equals to 0. So we have two factors. X plus 4 is a factor. Using the zero product property, we're going to set each factor equal to 0, and then we're going to solve both equations. So x plus 4 equal to 0. To solve for x, we subtract 4 to both sides. We have x is equal to negative 4. And then the second equation, 4x minus 3 equals to 0. We're going to add 3 to each side. We have 4x is equal to 3. Divide by 4. And we have x is equal to 3/4. So Our solutions for this equation is -4 and 3/4. This is using the zero product property. Now, the next example, we're going to solve this equation by using the zero product property, where we're going to set each factor 4x plus 9, x minus 10. Both factors are equal to 0, and then we're going to solve each equation. So first equation, 4x plus 9 equals to 0. We're going to subtract 9 to both sides. We have 4x is equal to -9. Then we're going to divide by 4. We have x is equal to -9 over 4. So this is one solution. The second solution, or second equation, we're going to add 10 to both sides. And we have x is equal to 10. Therefore, 10 will be a solution. So whenever we use the zero product property, we may have one solution. Depending on how we factor the quadratic equation, we may have two solutions, three solutions. So we're going to be doing a variety of different quadratic equations and how we're going to factor the quadratic equations in this lesson. But what's going to be key is us using the zero product property to solve the quadratic equation.